When I tell this story, I usually start with the part where the Child Protection Services caseworker actually found the money my mom had left me. One solitary $20 bill tucked into the fruit bowl on the kitchen counter, next to a rotting banana and some junk mail. At 11 years old, I wasn't stupid. I understood that money was important. But I had no conception of how much money was actually needed to survive for an entire month, especially for an 11-year-old child living alone. My mom, on the other hand, was an adult. She knew exactly what things cost. She knew how much a gallon of milk was, how much a loaf of bread cost, how much electricity we used. And yet, when she kissed my forehead and told me she'd be back in just a little while, leaving that $20 behind was her grand plan. Was I wrong to blame her for everything that happened next, for the decisions I had to make just to keep myself alive, and the consequences that came with it? If you were in my shoes, with only $20 and a single parent who has decided a month-long trip to Europe with her new special friend is more important than your life, would you have handled it differently? Would you have just made do? The thought of what that making do actually required makes me sick. And when CPS found me and saw exactly what that plan entailed, the look on my mother's face, after the authorities actually tracked her down and brought her back, screaming and protesting, that look is something I'll never forget. So let me tell you everything. This wasn't some sudden, split-second decision she made in a moment of mania. The plans had been in motion for weeks. She'd been obsessing over this trip, a month-long excursion with Gary, a guy she'd met a few months ago. He was supposedly wealthy, and he'd whisked her off her feet, her words. She was constantly looking at brochures of Parisian cafes and Italian vineyards, talking about all the asterisk culture she was going to absorb. When I asked her, "Mom, what about me?" she'd just wave her hand dismissively and say, "Oh, Leo, you're so melodramatic. You'll be fine. You're practically a man now. Think of it as a grand adventure." The grand adventure, apparently, didn't include childcare. I remember the morning she left vividly. It was a chaotic swirl of her throwing things into a suitcase and arguing with Gary on the phone. Yes, the boy, it's handled. He's excited, actually." That was the first big lie I overheard. I wasn't excited. I was terrified, but I was 11. My default state was doing what my mother told me to. I was conditioned to not make a scene, to not cause problems. So I packed a little bag, thinking maybe I was going to stay with my aunt, my grandparents. But when the time came and Gary's slick rental town car pulled into the driveway, my mom pointed to the fruit bowl. "There," she said breathlessly. "Just for emergencies, there's food in the fridge. I'll be back before you even miss me." That was it. No instructions, no phone number for Gary, no contact information, just a single $20 bill. The first few days, the gravity of the situation didn't fully hit. It was a novelty, a dark, weird sort of freedom. I didn't have anyone telling me to clean my room or to do my homework or to go to bed. I ate whatever cereal was left. I watched TV until 1:00 a.m. I played video games. The freedom felt exhilarating, but only in the superficial way freedom feels to a child. The underlying current of this is wrong was always there. The house felt huge and empty. The shadows in the hallway seemed darker. Every little creak made my heart pound, convinced that maybe my mom did lie, and some stranger was coming to get me. By day 4, the reality started sinking in. The cereal was gone. The leftover spaghetti was growing mold. The carton of eggs was empty. I looked in the freezer and found a bag of frozen peas, some freezer-burned hamburger patties, and some waffles. That was it. My pantry was a box of crackers and half a jar of peanut butter. This was the moment I looked at the $20. $20 seemed like a lot. In my child's mind, $20 could buy 1,000 things. So I took it and walked down the street to the little corner store, about 3 blocks away. When I got to the corner store, I quickly learned a devastating lesson. $20 is not a lot of money. The owner, a grumpy man who always eyed me with suspicion, watched me wander the aisles. I picked up a big loaf of bread, $4.00. I picked up a carton of milk, $3.50. I picked up some mac and cheese boxes, $1 each. A small pack of bologna, $5.00. A sack of potatoes, $6.00. I was already over $20. I put everything back. My chest was tight. I ended up with a loaf of bread, some generic peanut butter, a gallon of milk, and a 2-liter bottle of generic cola, which I somehow convinced myself was necessary. I left the store with my brown paper bag and a few coins in my pocket. That was my budget. I had spent everything my mother had given me to survive for a month in one afternoon, and I only had maybe 3 days of food. I tried to ration it. I only had one piece of bread with peanut butter for breakfast. No lunch, a slice of bologna and half a glass of milk for dinner. But a growing 11-year-old's stomach doesn't care about a budget. The hunger was a persistent, clawing thing. I spent my days just lying on the couch, watching TV to try and distract myself, but every commercial was about pizza or burgers or some new snack. The emptiness in my stomach felt like an expanding black hole. At night, I cried myself to sleep, burying my face in my pillow so the neighbors, who, by the way, were older and rarely around, wouldn't hear. Why did my mother do this to me? Where was she? Did she even care? The silence in the house was deafening. A week went by. My food was gone. The milk was sour and the bread was moldy. I was down to drinking the generic cola and licking the peanut butter jar. I was lightheaded and dizzy. When I looked in the mirror, I looked pale, my eyes sunken. I was a ghost. This is when the real desperation set in. I was 11. I didn't know how to call the police. I was scared to call my aunt because what if she got mad at my mom? What if she sent me to a group home? My mother's threats of, "Don't you dare tell anyone, or you'll be in big trouble," were burned into my mind. Her, or else, was a nebulous, terrifying prospect. I honestly believed that if I told anyone, I would be the one punished. So I did what a hungry animal does. I found ways. I remembered that some of the houses on our street left their garage doors open during the day. I was small. I could slip in and out. I started looking for simple things. A package of cookies sitting on a freezer, an apple from a fruit basket on a side table, a can of soda. I felt sick every time I did it. The guilt was suffocating. I wasn't a thief. I was a good kid. But the hunger made me someone else. It made me a hunter. I was methodical. I'd check the neighborhood schedules. I knew when the older couple at the end of the street went to bingo. I knew when the single mom 3 doors down was at her second job. I was a child, stealing to survive, and my mom was in a 5-star hotel in Rome, probably having the time of her life. This entire time, the thought consumed me. Was this really my life? Was I bad for doing this? Am I a criminal? Before I tell you how it all ended and what the CPS agent found, I really want you to stop and think about that. I want you to comment down below, what would asterisk you have done in my situation? An 11-year-old kid with $20 left for a month. Would you have just star asterisk ved to be a good kid? Or would you have done anything, asterisk anything, to survive like I did? Because the choices I made were born purely of desperation and the sheer will to exist. The trauma of it is something that never, ever leaves you. And what came next? What the authorities found in that house was a culmination of that survival instinct. It all ended on day 16. I was weaker than ever. I hadn't eaten anything of substance in 2 days. My hunts had been less successful, as people started closing their garages, probably because they noticed little things going missing. I was in my mom's room, lying on her bed, trying to smell her perfume just to feel asterisk some asterisk connection. I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I knew, a loud pounding on the front door jarred me awake. It was the police. One of the neighbors, it turns out, had become suspicious. She hadn't seen my mother in weeks, and she knew I was home because she'd seen the lights on at weird hours. She finally decided to call in a welfare check. Thank God for that neighbor. When the police officer looked through the living room window and saw me, pale and emaciated, lying on the floor, I'd staggered down, too weak to keep standing. He didn't wait. He kicked the door in. And what they found? This is where the story gets unbearable. They found the $20, like I said, still in the fruit bowl. But they also found the house itself, which I hadn't the energy to keep clean, a disaster of trash and empty food packaging I'd scavenged or stolen. The CPS caseworker who arrived shortly after, a woman named Janice with kind but determined eyes, didn't just look at the empty fridge. She went through my bag, the small bag I had kept packed, just in case. Inside, she found the scavenged items that I couldn't bear to throw away. She found crumpled, half-eaten granola bars I'd found in an open garage. She found a moldy potato I'd stolen from someone's garden. She found a couple of loose cigarettes I'd taken from an ashtray, thinking maybe I could trade them for something. I was 11. I didn't know. And she found something else, something that made her actually stop and wipe a tear from her eye. In the very bottom of my bag, carefully wrapped in a napkin, was a single, small, plastic bag of dog treats. I didn't have a dog. I had stolen them from a neighbor's open garage, thinking that if I got really desperate. Well, food is food. The CPS caseworker looked at those dog treats, then at the single $20 bill, and then at me, an 11-year-old boy who was practically a skeleton. The sheer, deliberate cruelty of my mother's plan hit her. It was worse than just neglect. It was calculated. It was leaving a living, breathing creature to find its own way, to see if it could manage to stay alive on $20 and the scraps of others. The aftermath was a hurricane. I was taken to the hospital immediately. I was severely malnourished and dehydration. Janice sat with me. She told me everything would be okay, that I was safe now. She called her colleagues to tracking my mother down. This took 2 more days. They had to use the credit card my mother was so gleefully maxing out in Europe. And then came the confrontation. A week after I was taken into protective custody, my mother was brought back to the country. They brought her into the police precinct, not in a nice limousine, but in an unmarked car. She was screaming, "This is an outrage. My son is fine. I left him money. I left him everything." When she saw me, sitting in a small room with Janice, she rushed forward, her face twisted in anger and fake concern. "Leo, tell them you were fine. Tell them it was an adventure." I didn't say a word. I just looked at her. I didn't see my mother. I saw a monster. I saw the person who was willing to let me starve, all for some asterisk culture and a man she barely knew. Janice stepped in front of me. She handed my mother a folder. "Mrs. Harrison, look at this." In the folder were photos. Photos of me in the hospital, my ribs visible. Photos of our empty kitchen, the molding banana still in the bowl, and a photo of the bag of dog treats. "This is what your son did to stay alive, Mrs. Harrison," Janice said, her voice like ice. "He stole dog treats. He scavenged from garages, all while you were at the Coliseum. Your son was 11 years old. The state is charging you with felony child abandonment and aggravated child endangerment." My mother looked at the photos, her face draining of all color. The anger, the defiance, it just crumbled, replaced by a deep, terrifying realization. But it wasn't realization of what she'd done to me asterisk. It was a realization of what was going to happen to her asterisk. "My trip," she whispered. "Our life." The legal process was a long, messy road. My mother was found guilty. She received a significant prison sentence, though it could have been longer if it weren't for a plea deal she took. She lost parental rights. I never saw her again. She tried to write me letters from prison, filled with excuses and claims of "I love you" that rang so hollow and false they made me physically ill. I never replied. I was placed in foster care, eventually adopted by a truly wonderful family who showed me what unconditional love actually meant. But the scars remain. The anxiety around food. The intense fear of being left alone. The question that always hangs in the air: was I really wrong to do what I had to do to survive, or was the original sin hers for putting me in that position? So that's my story. It's not a story with a happy ending, not really, but it's my reality. The moral I've learned is that parents aren't always parents by virtue of giving birth. True parenting is a commitment, a choice, and above all, it's about sacrifice. My mother chose herself, and she paid a price, but so did I. If you made it to the end of this, and you feel for that 11-year-old kid, please like this video. It shows me I'm not alone. Subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of these powerful, real-life stories. And share your final thoughts. Who was the real villain here? I want to know what you really think. Thanks for listening. I'll see you all in the next story.